Peninsula, but neither Jeff nor Mike are here, and I don't think anybody else is going to provide an update from Peninsula, are they? Nope. Transport and Business Forum, Jim Stewart. Jim, are you here?
I am here. Bridget, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Jim. Do give us your update, please.
Right. Okay. Yes. So we'll be looking to hold another meeting of the Transport and Business Forum in the early new year. The date to be decided. I'll liaise with your team in order to get as early a date as possible. I normally give you a little update on where we are with the port sector, because that's the area that I come from. So obviously with Brexit looming and a deal hopefully to be arranged imminently, most of the ports, I think, are prepared for Brexit one way or the other. There's been a huge amount of work, especially with the local resilience forum, from the individual ports. So obviously the amount of travel disruption depends on what deal is done. So if no deal is done, then we're expecting a substantial flow of freight traffic down to Poole in the southwest. If a deal is done, then that flow will be reduced. But either way, there will be delays because of the additional paperwork that needs to be done at the ports. So that gives you an update on where we are with the ports sector. And as I say, we'll be looking to hold a meeting of the Transport Business Forum early in the new year.
Jolly good. Thank you very much, Jim. Yeah, it's a bit of difficult to know when you're going to. I assume that meeting is going to be the Transport and Business Forum will be an online meeting, will it? Yes,
I can't see that we could have it any other way, to be honest, given the current situation.
Well, it is extraordinary. Sometimes some of these Teams meetings get a better attendance if they're online than they do actually if you're physically meeting somewhere, because it cuts out all that travel time. So let's keep our fingers crossed that you get a good attendance. Thank you. Swindon Borough Council, well, they're not here, are they?
Yes.
Philip
Martlew. Yes, Philip Martlew from Swindon Borough Council. As you mentioned earlier, I'm standing in for Philippa Venables and Samantha Howell, who would normally be leading on this. So I understand this is our first attendance at one of these meetings. Our associate membership only being approved at the previous meeting. So thank you for admitting us, and we're looking forward to engaging more closely with these meetings in future. I won't go into any of the details at the moment as to what Swindon's up to, other than to say that myself, Sam and Philippa are the right people to be involved, as we are also closely involved with England's economic heartland, subnational transport body. So hopefully we can triangulate all the shared interests to make sure that we're working effectively in everybody's best interests. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Yes, I think it will be very useful to get that cross-fertilisation. Thank you. DFT, David Glinos, I did see you. You sent a report in. What would you like to tell us about?
Yeah, good afternoon all. Hopefully you've had time to read my short 2-page update note ahead of this meeting. If not, I'm sure you'll find the time to read it afterwards. A couple of things just to bring out from the update note, please, if I may. STB funding, which of course is of great interest to everybody here. Since we last met, we have now allocated the £425,000 to Western Gateway for the current financial year to take forward a number of agreed work packages over the course of 2020-21, this financial year, but also no doubt throughout during the course of 2021 calendar year. Another thing which I know is of great interest to you is future STB funding from 21-22 onwards. Everybody will be aware we had a spending review very recently, and it was a 1-year spending review. We're still working our way through that spending review, so I'm afraid I don't have any news on whether any monies will be available for STBs for 21-22, and actually what that funding may be for Western Gateway. But it's something we're working on, and we hope to get draw our work to a conclusion on that very early in the new year. Other things to pick up since we last met in regards to COVID-19, my regular and my team's regular liaison with local authorities continues on COVID-19, and I guess one of the main parts of the news, because I know it was raised at a previous meeting, is that transfer of the Active Travel Fund has now been, the funding has now been announced, and hopefully those schemes will now be on their way to delivery over the months ahead. Other things just to pick out, I won't go through the spending review highlights, but there's lots of stuff in there for the Southwest, lots of opportunities for the Southwest, but also a few individual schemes which have been announced, but I'll leave you to read that in your own time. One last thing I'd like to pick out as well, because I know it's of great interest to the STB, is the rural strategy. So the DFT is undertaking a future transport rural strategy, and we're looking for views and evidence on that. So this call for evidence is open at the moment, and we invite submissions to be forwarded to us by the 16th of February 2021. Of course, the STB may wish to respond to that, and or local authorities may want to respond to that individually. Just to be aware of that, please. And that's about the update from DFT.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. I don't know if we are going to do an STB response to your rural strategy, or whether, I mean, I assume individuals will be doing them anyway, but I'm just sort of scanning for any officer response to see whether there's going to be a joined up response from us.
Bridget, if I may, we were going to raise it at SOG at the start of January to find out what views were. Consultation, I believe, is due in February, so we've got plenty of time.
That's one less thing you have to do over Christmas then. Brilliant.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Hi, was England. Alice. Hello, Alice. Welcome.
Hi, Bridget. Thank you. Yeah, I've got a few updates. I'm hoping you can hear me, because my network quality is not great today. So if I dip out, apologies, and I can always send an email update or something. So a couple of scheme updates. So A303 Stonehenge, we've had the DCO decision from Secretary of State in November, which was a positive decision. But of course, this remains a controversial decision, because obviously the planning inspector had recommended refusal. So there's quite a lot of controversy around it still, and there are legal challenges mounted against it. We therefore just wanted to raise the opportunity for the STB, if you felt inclined to do so, that there could be an opportunity to hear more supportive voices to balance that reaction that is out there, if you felt that was appropriate to do so. I know you put a submission into the Planning Inspectorate when it was being considered, which was very helpful and positive to the scheme. So I'll leave that with you to consider. We are progressing with the scheme in the meantime. So the contractors for preliminary works and archaeological works are expected to start on site in late spring, and the preferred bidder for the scheme construction will be announced very soon as well. The dates for the construction, we don't know precisely yet until we've got the bidder in place, but looking to start in 22-23. So that's A303 Stonehenge. Just very briefly on the A303 Sparkford to Ilchester, we're expecting the DCO decision on that one now later in January. So hopefully by the next board meeting we'll have an update on that one. Just a couple of more sort of network planning, longer term issues. Dorset, M4 to Dorset Coast strategic study. I know we've been talking with Alan Creedy and Parvis on this. So they may want to say something as well, but we're just to say that we're commencing the scoping study for that in the new year, which will identify the client scheme requirements for the study, the strategic study, set out the scope of that, what that scope is going to be, define the methodology and deliverables, develop a programme plan and milestones, and plan stakeholder engagement. And the point being that we will work with the STB, we'll engage with you as part of that scoping exercise in the new year. In terms of the timing on that, we're hoping to have the scope completed and agreed by the end of March, with the main study commencing after that. The other final thing just to say is thank you again for the STB colleagues for their engagement in the route strategy planning that's been going on for the last few months. The proposal from Highways England as to how route strategies will work is now with Secretary of State, so we're hoping to have a clear way forward agreed early in the spring so that we can launch the programme in March. It'll continue, well, if our proposal is agreed, we'll be carrying those out in sort of batches so that the overall programme of route strategies will last around a year, but each route strategy will just take a few months. So the sequencing of that has been considered. I think that's probably the main points I was going to bring up, unless anybody's got any questions.
Thank you, Alice. Oh, Alan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, not so much a question, more of a sort of thanks to Alice, really. We've been badgering Alice for a long time now for some updates on when the strategic study might commence. A number of colleagues will remember this was a sort of a corridor effort that predates the STB, but in no small way sort of actually defines the shape of our STB. So yeah, we were very pleased that the study was mandated in the RIS back in March, and certainly pleased now to see that the thing is underway at some speed. As Alice says, we understand that the scoping stuff will be the first bit of work, with the study commencing proper in March, and I think the ambition is to have that sort of work ready for inclusion in the RIS sort of initial report, which is generally towards the end of 2022. So yeah, we will be keen to be involved. Every indication is that we'll be a key stakeholder, both as the STB and the component authorities. So really good news. I think that's potentially a defining piece of work, and something really which might have some very significant implications for the whole of the STB through the work it does, and what ultimately comes out of that for as part of a sort of future strategy for future RIS to consider. So yeah, thanks to Alice for that, and hopefully colleagues will be pleased to hear that news. Yes,
I think we all are. And so thank you, Alice. And also the other comment about the A303 and a letter of support. Well, certainly as a Wiltshire resident, and I'm sure we all have an interest as well in the east-west route going along the A303. I think as an STB, we should be writing a letter of support. I think Micah Dowd-Jones is here from Peninsula, and I imagine that they will also want to give a letter of support, because it was all about the having the second route into the southwest. So unless anybody has got any objections, I suggest that we do, as an STB, write a letter of support for the Stonehenge scheme. And I can't see any hands up, anyone violently objecting to that. So we can get that. Alan, you're talking. Are you? Sorry, I beg your pardon. Chair, I don't think there's any reason why we shouldn't do that. It seems like a sensible idea. The only note of caution, I suppose, is that where we are at the moment is with the period for judicial review, which will expire on Christmas Eve, and really the thing that might get in the way of the scheme is whether there is a legal challenge, and the test for that legal challenge is confined to whether the Secretary of State's decision is legally sound. So I suppose we need to be careful how we frame something which helps with that
matter. Maybe that's a wording exercise. So on an in principle basis, I think, and I can see Mike has sort of commented in agreement, but I think we might just have to be a little bit careful how we frame that support in the light of the sort of events that are likely to or may occur over the next month or so.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll leave that to you to do over the Christmas holidays, Alan.
I can't think of anything better to do, Bridget. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on. Nigel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I should explain. Most of my life I've been a planning consultant and have been involved in quite a number of judicial challenges. I really think probably the best thing to do is actually take the legal advice of the lawyers who are acting for you in that challenge and get their steer on what could be helpful. The thing to avoid, of course, is raising new issues which those seeking to derail the scheme could seize on. It's very one has to be very nuanced about this. So I would take the legal advice.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. I think that's very helpful and probably very true. And always you start thinking, oh, lawyers. But we'll move on. Thank you, Alice. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just going to also say I'm not sure whether it's a letter that would help or whether it's more about sort of social media or public kind of statements. But we can pick those issues up with Alan as well after the meeting. All right, lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, Mike, I think you're here. Do we want to go back to you? Do you want to give us an update on the Peninsula?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late. Yeah, so I think, I mean, our update is fairly straightforward. Obviously, we have, like yourselves, received now our money from the Department for Transport, very gratefully received. So we're in the process of commissioning our work programme. We're some way through drafting a high-level strategy, which should be published early in the new year for consultation. And we're commissioning a lot of technical work underneath that, which will be rolled out over the next year or 18 months. Very similar work programme to yours. Continuing to join up on conversations across cross-boundary issues, so particularly around rail and studies that we're commissioning there, and work with Network Rail as well on their studies. So I think I'm very confident we're in a very joined up place at the moment, which is good. But nothing specific really to update on in terms of anything wider than that, but progress is good from our perspective and matching yours, I think, quite well. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Can we move on then? We've got Network Rail. Who is that? Matt?
It's me, Matt Hayward. Good afternoon, everybody. So I will just cover off a couple of points, and I will circulate a written update as well afterwards. A bit more comprehensive. So I think I'll start by talking about COVID, because the implications are, as we all understand, massive for the rail industry and most of the rest of society as well. So my colleague Daniel would have talked last time about the impact on passenger demand and the gradual recovery. Clearly, the second lockdown had an impact on that, and down to the low 20s of percent of pre-COVID demand. Not the same story for freight, which has has recovered significantly, and clearly the role of freight in the wider system has achieved a kind of new prominence. It should be said that performance across the network is historically high, and that's running sort of usually more than 90% of services. So there's lessons to be learned there that the industry has focused on learning. But the key thing from the point of view of trying to understand the role of the railway, not just in the longer term, but actually in a very short term as well, is what do we expect in terms of demand recovery. And as we are part of the Rail COVID forecasting group, which is trying to understand that, and that clearly is going to have huge implications for future services, and also what is key is the way that those services are specified. And we've all heard that this is the end of franchising and moving towards a form of contracting which has the department much more central, and that that does create opportunities, potentially significant opportunities for improved collaboration and kind of efficient use of capacity. So I think that's important as well in our planning work, which I'll just give you an update now on the strategic studies we are undertaking that we're involved with colleagues across the Western Gateway in. So there's 3 in flight at the moment: Bristol Birmingham, Bristol Exeter, and the Dorset connectivity study. They are all successfully going through, looking to output in around about April next year, all very much focused on connectivity, which is helpful given the kind of current state of affairs. Any capacity-based studies or enhancements are likely to be difficult to justify at this point in time, but all of these studies are looking specifically at growth and how that can be supported, and all identify potential service improvements. What was important is that all of those studies and our future programme align with the Western Gateway Rail strategy, which, as you know, we were closely involved with developing. Worth pointing out that a study that recently completed, the West of England line study, is now going through the decision-making process for an SOBC on the interventions that were identified, so kind of the chain in action, as it were. We do, as the Western Strategic Planning team, so just the Western route, we have agreed at this meeting in the past to get approval for our forward programme of strategic studies. So I will circulate that with the written update, because we do need to tick that box. It's something we've developed in collaboration with Western Gateway colleagues and the industry, so I hope that should be fairly straightforward, but I will do that. I will very briefly cover decarbonisation because the link was mentioned. We are now at the stage of really translating the national traction decarbonisation network strategy into regional decarbonisation strategies, and what's important is that those consider and factor in local priorities and policies, whereas clearly the national study needs to take that more national view and make sure that we are developing a sequencing and a set of priorities that are shared across our regions. So I think there's an important role for the Gateway in that as well. Happy to take any questions on any of that. And as I say, I will circulate a little bit more information afterwards.
Lovely, thank you very much. Has anybody got any questions for Matt? No hands springing up. Well done, thank you very much. Yes, look forward to seeing your update as well, which will come around with the minutes. Thank you. Finally, I know it's not on the list, but I wanted just to bring in Alan Creedy just to give us an update on the STB liaison group. Alan, are you still there? And can you give us an update on the liaison group?
Yes, Bridget. Sorry. So this is the group that David Carter and myself attend. There was a lengthy agenda over the last Thursday and Friday. I've not had time to write my notes up for that, and I'll do that. And circulate those if that's helpful, Chair. But I think a couple of things that come out of that. One is the sort of uncertainties that the one-year spending review has brought about. A number of the matters that STBs are interested in are looking for funding commitments beyond that. Schemes. People are looking for the certainty of funding beyond that. Understandably, the department isn't in a position to give that certainty in much the same way that David mentioned earlier on, as far as our own funding, that sort of continuity of funding beyond that period, very difficult for anybody to imagine. But we have a note from DFT confirming that they're still very supportive of that. But the only thing that they can do at the moment is take decisions within the current funding envelope and wait for future rounds for further certainty. I think the other two areas particularly which give, I say cause for concern, there are sort of interdependencies in some of the things that the department is doing that we, our own work is dependent on. One of them is an awaited bus strategy, but particularly the Department for Transport's transport decarbonisation plan. That's seen as a very key piece of work. The intention was recently, until last week we'd understood that that was still the intention to publish that piece of work sometime prior to the end of the calendar year, otherwise, in other words, this side of Christmas. Confirmation now that that work has been delayed until the spring. I don't think anybody really has any more idea about whether it's the front end of spring or the back end of spring. In fairness to the department, there is so much going on, so many things that influence that, not the least of which is Prime Minister's 10-point plan and other factors. But it does mean that for our own, for instance, work that we might have chosen to do in terms of decarbonisation, there are aspects of that that we really won't be able to get our teeth into until we get that direction from DFT. So yeah, still fairly difficult to see our way clear on a number of funding and policy issues. But as I say, I'll complete the notes on a number of other matters that were raised during the sessions and make them more widely available when I've finished, Chair, if that's okay. Happy to take questions, but not much more to add than what I've just said, really.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Has anybody got any questions? Nigel, you looked as though you were reaching forward for your button. No? No. I can't hear you, you're on mute.
No, sorry, Madam Chairman. Well, I think most of us, at least, are grateful for hearing that information, because a number of us, particularly in Gloucestershire, in terms of our local transport plan review, we were holding back with the prospect of hoping to deal with that report in that draft, but it looks as if that's not going to be possible, because we were able to take that to Cabinet in January and to Council the following month, following March. So that is a bit of a setback. So I suppose, in a sense, if we're to continue any work on this, we've really got to look to the draft work, which I believe was published earlier in the year, in terms of government's decarbonising aspirations. I wouldn't be comfortable if we just put this on hold until the spring. Who knows? Even in the spring, there might be yet more delay. That's the experience we've had over the last few months. So it's probably a question of trying to anticipate where the government's going, given the leads that were given earlier in the year.
Thank you. Alan, did you want to comment on that?
No, Councillor Moore's right. We're in the same dilemma as a local authority and a group of local authorities, much the same as we are as an STB. I think there are some things that we can do. So, for instance, sort of benchmarking and particularly a sort of gathering a baseline of information is work that we can do, and indeed, as an STB, we are doing. It's when we start to try to anticipate sort of various scenarios and begin to put plans together. Very tricky to do that. This is sort of it's like playing poker, really, isn't it? It depends how much you want to bet at this stage to get ahead of the game, but don't want to waste your money finding that you're potentially heading off in a direction that you don't want to go. So yeah, difficult, but yeah, all faced with the same issue, Chair.
Thank you. Jeffrey, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a question for Alan. Given the point we've got later in the agenda about modelling, was there any discussion about modelling and what various areas we're using?
Well, that's a subgroup of the sort of national liaison stuff, Chair. I think Ewan is with us to be able to give us an update on that more specifically, but no, it doesn't. The last week's group doesn't get into that in any great detail. It relies on the separate technical group to give some advice on that. So one is a sort of subset of the other, really.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I think we'll move on now. Next item on the agenda is the programme overview, update and forward plan. Nuala, it's over to you.
Hello, everybody. Hopefully to keep this quite short and sweet for you all. In relation to programme overview, as a couple of people will mention later on in their papers, We have progressed with the modelling review. In relation to strategic transport, that paper is with you today. We've got our first strategic corridor group meetings on the 18th and 19th of January, which people should have received an invite to. And we are progressing, Robert Murphy is progressing on behalf of the STB with what are we doing now in relation to a carbon audit and getting our baseline position. And we're working with WECA on this. What I would say in relation to all of this, we have regular discussions in diary now with the DFT. So if there are any issues or concerns that we need to discuss with them, I think that's probably a good place to deal with those discussions. In relation to what we really wanted to focus the conversation on, unless there's any particular issues or questions in relation to the programme update, is the resourcing plan. We are seeking a request for a delegation at this board meeting to approve our option C resource plan and delegate the arrangements to the programme team under the supervision of the senior officers group. What this proposal effectively is we, given the fact that we have an increased funding level and a decent work programme under our belts now, we need people to be able to deliver that. So we are seeking to secure those resources. They will be directly tied into delivering the outputs of the projects, and that is in relation to option C. So we need to increase our resourcing level to approximately 2 FTE. At the moment, we have about 0.5 FTE between Ben and Ewan. So we need to increase our technical officer capacity to FTE. So this isn't in relation to anything to do with Secretariat or myself or Sarah. It's purely for technical officers to deliver outputs for the projects. So that is what we're hoping to ratify with the board today, that they're happy for us to progress with arrangements and securing resources to deliver the programme. So pause in case anybody has any particular questions on that. But I'm hoping we can approve that today. Okay, thank you, Nuala. Actually, it was useful to hear from Alice from Highways England about the north-south study route from the coast to the M4, which fits in nicely with the Midlands to South Coast route that you've got the meeting for on the 19th of January. I suppose I also would like to make sure that we get regular updates on progress, and I think you're quite happy with that. Yes. And there was just a slight change to go onto the table on page 13 of the year-to-date position that yes, on the funding, which will be corrected when it goes into the minutes, won't it? It will be, yes. We have a balanced position. On that basis, then members of the board are recommended to note the update on delivery progress in the overall programme, approve option C of the resource plan and delegate the arrangements to the programme team under the supervision of the senior officers group, and note the financial update. So if you're all happy with that, I assume a silence is assent. If you are not happy, please scream. Right, you've had your chance. That's it, all approved. Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is the Strategic Transport Plan 2020 to 2025 for adoption. Ben, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this paper is to seek approval for the publication of the Western Gateway Strategic Transport Plan 2020 to 2025. At the previous board meeting, it was agreed to delay approval of the draft plan to enable additional officer time to review and amend the document in light of the representations that were received during our public engagement process. The updated STP has changed significantly from the one that was previously shared with members, but it's considered that the redraft document to be far more robust and provides greater certainty to stakeholders regarding the role and the priorities of the STB over the next 5 years. The board may recall that within the paper presented in September, 3 key areas of action were identified. The first was the need to ensure that the STP kept apace with government policy. This is especially in light of the carbon reduction pledges made by the STP members and the ongoing impacts of COVID-19. In response, the updated STP is an expanded section of known strategic transport challenges. However, the elephant in the room really is the the juxtaposition of the need to support international connectivity, particularly by sea and air, but at the same time reducing carbon reductions. So officers feel that we have kind of struck the right balance within the redrafted document, but at the same time we do feel we need to make it aware that if members don't feel that we've adequately addressed their concerns, that there will be opportunity after this board meeting to kind of capture those comments. However, we do feel we have kind of got it correct. The second area really is in relation to the schemes that were identified within the previous plan. Some stakeholders felt that there was a disconnect between schemes identified and their role in supporting the over and wider policy aims of the STP. In response to both these issues, the strategy outcomes have been fully revised, as have the schemes. Where there are gaps within our known evidence base, they've also now been identified, and as Neil has just outlined within the previous item, our forward programme outlines where we intend to get those studies and the timing of those studies. The other key issue which I wanted to raise was in relation to the document structure. The previous STP was kind of written around spatially focused around the key urban areas and the strategic transport corridors. This resulted in the unintended consequence of the actual strategy being very highways dominated, and that was certainly something we wanted to rebalance within our updated strategy. So in response to this, what we've done is we've got dedicated section covering different modes. So we're hoping that this actually now provides a far more multimodal feel to the strategy and addresses those concerns. The other things which we've done is we've actually removed references to the urban hubs, and we've actually removed also the key references to the strategic corridors. The strategic corridors are actually fundamental in our long-term plan, but at the moment we haven't quite got enough multimodal evidence to support them and to provide that robust strategy. So that's why we've removed them and just made reference to them within the appendix. As Neil has already mentioned, our new long-term our strategic corridor groups will kickstart from the new year, and that's really when we're going to start developing these corridor plans, and updates will be provided from the board in the future. Finally, the other new section that's been identified is how the STP will be monitored, and the programme will be looked at throughout the lifetime of the plan. Again, this was at the request of several stakeholders and quite an omission from the first draft. So we've now made a commitment that we provide the board with an update regarding our programme as we move forward. During the drafting process for the updated document, board members and senior officers have been kept informed of the changes and the representations received. So in conclusion, approval is sought for the draft STP from the board, along with its publication on the Western Gateway website. Excuse me. In light of any non-material changes that have been requested by the board, following the meetings, it requested that delegated authority be provided to senior officers so the final amendments could be made in consultation with the chair. Excuse me. Approval is also requested to commence the necessary final design work ahead of STB publication. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Nigel, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've given my support earlier for what I think is a much improved document, but what I wanted to share with members now is what I see as a very key change to the document, which is this emphasis on rural accessibility. That really didn't feature very much at all, and I did draw attention to that during our earlier discussions. I'm really pleased to see that, because for counties like Gloucestershire, I'm sure it's the same for a number of other counties in the area, which are in a sense semi-rural, in our extensive rural areas. It is a real problem in the sense of how we meet our climate change challenge whilst tackling that whole question of rural accessibility. And I think that's become really more apparent during COVID as public transport, both in the urban areas, but also even more particularly in the rural areas, has really almost non-existent. I mean, I'm just tired of seeing empty buses running around my division, having fought for the maintenance of those services over the last 8 years. So that is a really important aspect, I think, of our strategy. So I'm very pleased to see that emphasis. I just wanted to flag that up, and maybe other members representing areas like Gloucestershire might also want to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Toby Savage, you've got your hand up.
Chair. sorry, put my microphone down. Chair, yeah, thank you. And yeah, I did want to echo Nigel's comments. I think it's really good to see that recognition of rural accessibility as a strategic challenge that we need to address. And I would also like to welcome more broadly the changes that have been made to this document and providing a better balance between decarbonisation and economic growth. There was one new point I'd wanted to make, which was just around, obviously, accepting that schemes without current funding commitments through RIS2 are not referenced within this document because of the short-term aspect of it. But I think it's really important to continue to lobby as a sub-regional transport body for those to be included as part of RIS3, and therefore important to keep sight of those longer term aims that we all have. Thank you, Chair.
Ben, did you want to comment on that?
It was just to assure the member that those points will absolutely be picked up through our strategic corridor groups. Highways England will be a member of each of those groups, and as we progress our evidence base, absolutely will identify new schemes, and the output of those strategies is very much to inform RIS3, so that absolutely will be captured in our future work programme.
Okay, I did have a comment. There's in the previous paper, there's a mention of the freight strategy. There's mention of the freight strategy in the strategic transport plan. But then when we're looking at the sub-regional priorities and looking at those strategies, it's not mentioned in there. So I just want to make sure we don't forget about the freight strategy. It seems to the timelines that are mentioned in paper A seem to just match up with all the other timelines for the other studies. So I would like to make sure that that is included.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, that was simply an omission. Within the main body of the text, it references the freight strategy, just unfortunately got missed from the 2 bullet point sections within the document. All
right, thank you very much. Well, I know that, which paper am I looking at now? Paper C, isn't it? Sorry, trying to get myself sorted. No, that's the wrong one. Where have I put it? I was just looking at the recommendations. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry, I got very ham-fisted here. Here we are. Nope, not found it. What have I done with it? I am sorry.
Bridget, do you need somebody to share the relevant part of the document to help with that?
Yeah,
help?
I was just looking for the recommendations because I know there was a slight amendment that we wanted to make.
I'm going to ask Nuala. Would you?
Yes.
Could you share a screen, Nuala, please?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
No problem. They're in front of you, hopefully.
Yes, that's very. Of course. Now that you've put it up, I found it. Typical. So I did want to make an amendment to recommendation little 3, which was to delegate authority to the programme management team to undertake the final design work required for publishing the plan. And we would like just to amend that so that is subject to the chair and the vice chair's approval, and also that any minor amendments to the plan, such as including the freight strategy, will also be agreed by the chair and vice chair before publication. So I hope that's all right. So the board is recommended to approve the Strategic Transport Plan 2020 to 2025, which I hope you're all happy with. Delegate authority to senior officers in consultation with the chair to action any non-material changes requested by the board. And chair and vice chair, let's say, and any subsequent minor amendments. delegate authority to the programme management team to undertake the final design work required in consultation with the chair and vice chair before publishing the plan, and little 4, approve publication on the Western Gateway's website. So unless anybody has any violent objections and wants to raise their hand, then I assume that you're all happy with this and that can proceed. Yep, nobody's raised their hand. All right, lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for all your hard work, everybody. I do think that the time taken, you know, if we'd rushed it in September, it wouldn't have been such a good document as it is now. So well done. I think that's a good achievement, and a few months delay doesn't hurt anybody that are in this particular instance. Okay, thank you. Can we move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is paper C and the strategic modelling review. Ewan.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Back in June of this year, this board agreed to allocate up to £25,000 to commission a study to identify the most appropriate and proportionate transport modelling tools for the STB to use to develop our long-term STP, Strategic Transport Plan. The study has been procured for £17,000 and has been completed subject to final amendments by consultants WSP, and that study is appended to this report. Important, it was deemed by the programme management team as very important to have an independent third-party expert recommendation that considers all of the constraints objectively and understands the technical requirements such as the constraints such as finance, time constraints, the impacts of COVID, and the relevance that has to normal transport distribution patterns. The study included a review of all possible options, and these are detailed in the paper. And this has thrown up a number of questions with respect to the most appropriate model. WSP has recommended not to construct a bespoke Southwest regional transport model due to the huge cost that would be incurred, risk of duplication, time constraints in light of our phasing for our STP, but it suggests using the existing Highways England Southwest regional transport model that was last validated in 2015. One of the challenges identified is that if we do use this model, by the time we start carrying out the corridor assessments that have been outlined by Ben previously, the 2015 model would be greater than 5 years old, which is the recommended time span as a maximum to inform strategic transport schemes. But also due to the impacts of COVID on creating non-normal conditions in 2020 and 2021, the consultants have indicated that there's a possibility that the DfT may be inclined to relax this condition. However, we have to seek a view from DfT on this. We have already engaged with them, and the department has indicated that we can start discussions in detail on this point in early new year. The consultants in the report have also identified that there are a number of other additional benefits to using an updated model. The model that Highways England currently have, the 2015 model, is being updated to use a 2019 base. Delivery of this is expected in October of 2021. However, there's a risk that this could fall beyond that delivery date. And if that is the case, it would not fit in with our timescales to inform the long-term strategic transport plan. With this in mind, the recommendation is that we proceed with discussions with the Department for Transport and take a steer on their view as to whether or not the 2015 option or the 2019 option is the best way forward. These are planned to take place in the new year. The costs of the preferred option outlined in the study is to be in the region of £150,000, but for contingency purposes we're planning for up to £200,000. While this may seem expensive, it's considerably cheaper than building a brand new model and offers a number of other benefits. So the conclusion of the report is that the programme management team and the senior officers group request that the board notes the content of this report and delegates authority to the senior officers group to engage with the department and to proceed accordingly. Thanks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant, thank you. Oh, David Glynos is obviously going to quiz you.
Not so much quiz, but as the Department for Transport was mentioned a number of times in that paper, I thought I should say a few words. Yeah, we're more than willing to obviously work with you as soon as we can in the new year. Need to put you guys in touch with our expert modelers in the department. Emphasise that's certainly not me, but subject to their resource, hopefully they'll be able to engage with you quite quickly in the new year. I think we'll have to leave it open we can't make the decision basically on what year's model will be appropriate. Obviously the up-to-date one would be best, I know that, but we have to see what my modelers say in regards to the appropriateness of using the older model going forward. So yeah, I guess it's a watch this space, and no doubt we'll get an update at the next board meeting.
Okay, thank you, David. Nigel.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've just noticed, I was reading the report as you were speaking, Ewan, and I noticed that we seem to have already jumped up 50k from the estimate given in the report, which was 130,000 to 150,000, and so we're already at 200,000. So what kind of contract are we going to have with the consultants on this? Because this kind of thing, I know from my own experience, we can get ourselves in a very difficult situation if we don't tie them in. These things can really run away with themselves.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. The estimate that was provided by the consultants in the study was between 130 to 150,000 pounds. Yeah. But that was caveated with that this was a high-level estimate, and further detailed work would need to take place in order to finalise the final estimate. Purely for programme management purposes, we took the decision that it's probably sensible to plan for contingencies up to an extra £50,000, but we would certainly aim to achieve the best value possible, and that's an absolute maximum. And I don't know whether Nuala, you wanted to comment on that, but that was loosely where we were.
Yeah, I think what we will do is we will be engaging with the DFT, we will be engaging with the other modellers from member authorities and the STBs, and working with our own procurement team in WECA to make sure we get best value for money. We've certainly been through the hurdle in WECA in relation to procuring modelling contracts, so we're well aware of how they can expand exponentially to a certain extent. So we will be reporting on a regular basis to the board anyway, so we shall certainly keep you informed if there's any cost pressures, and we'll be talking to the senior officers group about this again in January, so we'll definitely make sure we keep you all in the loop.
Okay, having flagged it up, I think I'll take those assurances for the moment, but we've flagged it up. We really need to keep a very careful look at this. Thank you.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder whether some of this stuff, the financial information, should be part two. I don't know whether we can have part two. Keep it confidential. The trouble is, as soon as you start mentioning a fee band within which that you hope the modelling costs will be, the more likely it is to end up at the higher end sometimes. So I don't know if it's possible we can have part two information that is financially sensitive or not. Is that, I'm not sure if it's written into our constitution, but maybe it's something we need to talk about actually.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Can I support you fully on that? I think you make a very good point there. I mean, that's the way I'm sure most of our councils work on issues like this.
Yeah, I think we should definitely look at that. Okay, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to ask you, and what's the date we need this model, Ewan, to start using it to keep on track for all the stuff we're trying to do? Just remind us.
Thanks. I think it depends on the steer that we receive from the government. If we are given the all clear to proceed with using the 2015 model, then it's perfectly reasonable that we could start that process as early as in the new year. However, if it's deemed more appropriate to use, as David Glynos has suggested, the later model, then we'll need to reconsider the timescales for our own strategic transport plan, if indeed we want to use that model to inform the aspirations that prioritised through that. There are other things that we can proceed with before using the Southwest Regional Transport Model. I haven't gone into huge detail about the technical process, but there is a proposal to use a GIS-based visual interface called Project View, which would enable the authorities within the STB's geography to visualize spatial and transport strategy data on the single platform. That could be procured quite quickly and would give us an understanding of the evidence base with which to inform the discussions through the strategic the strategic partnership groups. The other thing is that it's very difficult to look into the future and understand exactly what we want to be modelling until we've carried out the work through the partnership groups. It may be the case that the different partnership groups propose and agree a different list of priorities to others, and the sort of interventions or the schemes that may come forward through those groups, it's almost impossible to say what needs to be modelled. So we're kind of waiting for the next stage before we can answer that question in full, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Ewan, for this report. I was rather concerned when I saw within the report the risks about the age of the data that's being used and the impact that may have. But I do recognise that this is a strategic model for strategic purposes, and that local authorities will have their own models for their own local plan usage. But I'm also encouraged by what Nuala said a moment ago, that work is taking place with the local authorities, so that there is a sort of a cross-sharing of information, so that we get the best of both worlds, shall I say. And I was also encouraged by what David Glenell said a moment ago, about using the most up-to-date information as soon as possible. So thank you, Ewan.
Thank you. I think that it's a very important point, and we've certainly taken note of the need to integrate our members' spatial strategies to inform transport going forward, and then vice versa as we do so on an iterative basis. And we're just waiting for a steer from the government as to whether or not the best way forward is. But inevitably, the most recent data is obviously superior, but that is likely to have an impact on the timescale for planning our strategic transport plan. And we as an STB will need to take a view as to which is the best way forward in that regard. It may be the case that if the delivery of the 2019 model slips into 2022, then that has an impact on delivery of our STP, or we may choose not to include modelled interventions within that, but that poses its own risks, and that's a topic for a later discussion, I think. But thank you.
Thank you, Ewan.
Thank you, Ewan. Jeffrey, your hand is still up. Did you want to come back, or have you had your say? Gone down. Thank you. Okay. Don't appear to be any other questions, so can we move forward to the recommendation, which is that the board is recommended to approve the strategic modelling study included in Appendix A, delegate authority to programme management team and senior officers in consultation with the chair to proceed with the preferred modelling approach following consultation with Department for Transport, delegate authority to the programme management team to undertake any procurement of technical tools to inform the long-term strategic transport plan, and approve publication of the study on the Western Gateway's website. So I hope that you are all happy with that, and unless I see any hands coming up, I assume that everybody is happy with that, and that's approved. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. Can we move on now then to agenda item 8, which is taking the Western Gateway rail strategy forward, paper D. James White.
Thank you, Chair. For those who don't know me, my name is James White. I'm in the transport team at the West of England Combined Authority, and I've also taken over from Ewan as leading the rail officer group from the Western Gateway. This report sets out two things. One, taking forward the Western Gateway Rail strategy via a series of task forces, and secondly, a brief update on the CMSP studies and how they link very closely with the rail strategy itself. Members will recall that back in September, the rail strategy was adopted, and it focuses around 4 route maps for delivery around strategy, infrastructure, access to the rail network, and operational solutions. And the strategy recommends that to deliver those route maps, 5 separate task forces should be set up, and therefore strategic planning, digital solutions, stations and access to rail, freight, and future ready and resilience. The rail officer group, which is made up of officers drawn from all the authorities in the Western Gateway area, we've been discussing how to take forward these task forces, what sort of membership should they have, and who should be the lead. And table 1 in the report sets those out in more detail. It lists the conditional outputs which need to be delivered by those task forces. It proposes suggested leads, what the membership of each of the task forces should be, captures where there's existing work going on in relation to that task force, and then a comment about priorities. Because the big challenge here is that the 5 task forces are going to require a considerable amount of resource to take forward all at one go. So the report proposes to prioritise taking forward these task forces and focusing on 3 of them where the Western Gateway can have a much larger role to play. And those ones are stations and access to rail, where there's already quite a lot of work going on across all the authorities in terms of improving access to stations, enhancing the whole station experience. And this is one where the Western Gateway is in a strong position to lead on. Digital solutions is in a very similar position as well. There's loads of initiatives going on across the Gateway area around ticketing and wayfinding and journey apps. And in Bristol and Bath Wecker area, there's the future transport zones pilot currently being implemented. So this is another one where the Western Gateway can provide the lead, or could be an independent lead if required, but it's one that will capture what the work that's going on, so it's suggested as a priority. The third suggestion for taking forward as a priority is the strategic planning one. Matt Hayward earlier on this afternoon outlined all the CMSP work that is going on, the continuous modular strategic planning or strategic rail studies. There's a lot of these studies going on. This task force would serve a role in bringing them all together, providing the overall direction. This could be led by the Western Gateway, or it could be led by an independent lead to provide that impartiality. So again, because there's all this background work going on, it makes sense to focus on that task force as well. This is not to neglect the other 2 task forces, the freight one and the future ready and resilient one, but these are more for the rail industry itself to lead. With Western Gateway input and with Western Gateway officers certainly helping those task forces, but given some of the scale of the measures required in these and where those measures are more out of local authority Western Gateway control, it makes more sense to look to the industry to lead on those. Just very briefly on those CMSP studies, which Matt talked about earlier, the report picks up on the way that there is a very close alignment, and Matt has already mentioned this as well. Just to give you an example here, the Bristol to Exeter and the Bristol to Birmingham studies, as a base timetable for the train service specifications, Network Rail used what was in the Western Gateway rail strategy and is now building on that to provide an even better option. So there is a good close alignment between what's in the Western Gateway rail strategy and what's coming out of the CMSP studies as well. In terms of recommendations, approval is sought from the board to agree to setting up the task forces and prioritising them. Also, approval is sought to delegate authority to the senior officers group to set up the task forces and lead them and confirm the programme, resources and activities that's required to take forward the rail strategy. And approval was also sought for the Rail Officer Group to continue to represent the Western Gateway at the various CMSP workshops that are going on. So I'm happy to take any questions on taking the strategy forward, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you very much. David, Glenos or Glynos?
It depends who you speak to. We've always used Glynos because it's been anglicised, but it's actually supposed to be Glenos by all accounts. It's a Greek name. So anyway, so back to rail strategy. Can I just raise a couple of observations, if I may, on particular paragraphs. Paragraph 1.4, we reviewed to a devolution deal for Western Gateway in summer 2022. I might be missing something here, but I'm not aware of any devolution deal for summer 22 for the STB, but I'm happy to be corrected on that one. On paragraph 3.1, we talk about the funding, and that funding is provisionally allocated for 21, 22 and 22 to 23. I've spoken about funding previously, of course. As we speak today, we have no funding for 21, 22, although I'm hopeful that we'll be able to resolve that. But the exact work packages which will be supported through any funding which becomes available will have to be subject to discussion with the DFT and agreement with the DFT. And when we look further forward to 22-23, well, there will be no confirmation of funding for 22-23 until a subsequent spending review around this time next year, when, of course, we do hope that we'll have a multi-year settlement once Brexit and obviously the current COVID situation is all under control. So I just wanted to make those observations, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I suppose then that we need to just rewrite that paragraph, don't we?
Chair, if I may, the devolution deal reference is made in the rail strategy itself. It may have been somewhat optimistic and anticipating something that hasn't actually happened. So yes, we can reword that in the report. And also in terms of the funding, it does say in the paragraph that the funding is subject to confirmation.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, James. I just wanted to make the point that you're not going to get that confirmation for a good, probably in regards to the 22-23 funding, for a good 12+ months. It's not something that is imminent.
Thank you very much. Jeffrey.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. I was just wondering when we would hear back about any progress in establishing these groups. Is there a timetable that goes with what we're doing here? And secondly, just an observation really, in the second priority task force digital solution, obviously there are digital solutions which help people with ticketing, etc., but they do need to have access as well. So I hope we've not omitted digital access on stations, on trains, etc. Thank you.
Chair, if I may come back, the intention is to start these task forces off early next year. I would anticipate bringing regular progress reports back to these board meetings. Potentially, I think every board meeting we should be able to provide an update on how the task forces are progressing. So if that's acceptable, that's what I suggest we will do. Digital solutions, yes, it's a very good point that there will still be a large proportion of the population who will not have access to digital solutions. Before COVID, it's changing rapidly, and GWR will quote figures about how many people now buy their tickets using their phone or using their smart cards, but that still leaves a large amount of the population who aren't using those. So it is still going to be important to retain those non-digital solutions going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, you've got...
Yeah, Thank you, James. Interesting paper. Now, it may be my interpretation of what is actually being said. The recommendation recommends setting up all 5 task forces, but then you go on to say that task forces 4 and 5 are a lower priority and may be left to others, in quotes, to deliver. My interest is in being future ready, but then future ready could be actually part of task force 1 anyway. But equally, you've then just said in the answer to the question a moment ago that you're going to bring back reports. So maybe my answer to my questions will come at the next meeting when you bring back the updates.
Yep. I think when I was talking about prioritising task forces, the 4 and 5, the freight and the future ready and resilient one, it's more about not having enough resources really to take those forward and acting in a leading role, and allowing Network Rail or the freight operating companies, for example, who might be in a stronger position to start to lead on those. But it's not to say that there won't be progress on all 5 task forces going ahead, and I would hope we would be able to push all 5 forward, but just in the initial period to focus on those top 3 task forces.
If I don't mind interjecting for a second, we need to program this out in detail, and we need to be sensible, because based on our funding, there's only so much activities we'll be able to undertake. And what we need to do is also overlay that with details from the member authorities programs to make sure we get economies of scale from members, as well as the STB when we're doing delivery. So we need to do that very detailed mapping out of the portfolio so that we can assist James and assist our members, so we don't effectively flood the market for rail officers who are already engaged with member authorities work programs. So that work is a piece of work we're going to conduct in the new year with James. But there will certainly be elements as part of the strategic planning, the corridor groups and the decarbonisation work that we will be looking at and making sure that we consider and discuss and think about rail as well at the same time. Sorry, James, to interject. I just wanted to make sure you were supported in that. And also, as Councillor Wayman mentioned earlier, the request from the board was to produce regular updates on the work programme, and I think it's only sensible, as David suggested earlier, that we give an update on the entire work programme to the board on a very regular basis, as opposed to just on a quarterly basis. Councillor Reid. Sorry, James, for interjecting. I do apologise. That's a little bit rude, but I just wanted to make sure I've got your back, James.
Thank you,
James, thank Nuala for answering my question. That was very helpful. Thank you both.
Matt Hayward, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think I second Nuala's point there. James and I discussed this previously, and I just think that it's worth noting, in terms of the breadth of its scope, the ambition of the strategy, and therefore the work involved in carrying all aspects of that forward, I think cannot be underestimated. And I should say, clearly with my selfish hat on, that there will be external organisations who will need to be involved in probably all these task forces as well, and their resource will need to be considered as well. I think there's a few important urgent steps about the structure of the 4 task forces in terms of reference, and crucially discussing and agreeing with potential leads that have been nominated, and key representatives, which is why in previous correspondence we've emphasised the preference to use existing forums wherever possible, and also I think a potential opportunity on some, if not all, of the task forces is actually there are opportunities with neighbouring STBs. Now that seems counterintuitive, and it won't be the case probably for all of them, but particularly with the freight task force, we've been having similar discussions with Peninsula Transport, and actually again any opportunities to realise those kind of scale economies should be considered. Let's not forget, clearly the rail system doesn't quite respect the same boundaries, so there's a clear opportunity to kind of just look at the best way to focus the resource on the issues that Western Gateway are facing, but also those similar questions are being asked elsewhere as well.
Thank you, Matt. Nuala, did you want to come back again?
Yes, if you don't mind. So absolutely, synergies and economies of scale. So I think Peter has reached out to Mike earlier in the week to compare work programs so that we can get economies of scale. So you're only dealing with, it's more efficient that way. Matt, just to reassure you, we don't want to have multiple people bugging you. We'll do it all together.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Assuming there are no more questions, James has already read out the recommendations, but I think we're going to add another one then to report back to the board regularly on progress on the rail strategy or on the various route maps or different strands that we are going to be investigating. All right, so if everybody's happy with that, there are a couple of hands up, but I don't think Nuala or David have a vote in it. So I assume that everybody is happy with the taking the rail strategy forward. Good. Thank you very much. Thank you. All these things are beginning to move now. It's quite okay. The next item on the agenda is agenda item 9, which is confirm the Secretariat for 2021-22. I've not seen any bits of paper about this, and I assume it's just to note that the West of England Combined Authority is the current Secretariat, and are you progressing for next year as well?
Peter, do you want to come in this?
Yes, Chair, just apologies, there's no specific paper on this. The programme management team looked at the situation with regards to managing and administering the STB resource, and I think there was a unanimous view that things were working fairly well, and hopefully you would agree with that, and we can just roll forward the Secretariat arrangements. Obviously, it's quite an effort to change the Secretariat and the accountable body roles, and we didn't feel that with everything else going on and the programme developing at the moment that it was possible or appropriate to review that significantly. So obviously we can look at it again on an annual basis, and we will do so next year, but for the time being we felt that the programme team was in a good place in terms of being able to manage the entirety of the programme and the Secretariat side.
Thank you. It all seems to be running very smoothly as far as I'm aware, and I think you're doing a great job, so thank you. And thank you for offering to take it forward next year. I assume there's no objections, so we're happy with that to proceed. Yep. Okay, can we move on then? Thank you very much for doing that. Agenda item 10, which is any other business. There is one item. I was just aware that in March each year we are required to vote on and select a new chairman and vice chairman. And it occurred to me that we all have, or probably a vast majority of us have, elections in May. So I did think it was slightly could be slightly disruptive if we change the chairmanship and vice chairmanship in March, and then we have a completely new board. We could possibly have a completely new board after May. So my proposal was that we continue, what I would like to continue as chairman of the STB until May. And then at the June meeting, there will be the opportunity to select and vote on a new chairman and vice chairman. And I would very much like your support for that, and for Nigel Moore to continue to be vice chairman. Has anybody got any comments? Jeffrey.
Yes, I'd just like to say I support that fully, Bridget. I think that's a very good idea. And out of ignorance, I'd just like to ask the question, are we subject to PERDA in this organisation, or is that not something that affects what we do?
Good question.
It does. Sorry, Chair, do you want to it does affect it in the normal rules, which your democratic service officers no doubt can inform you, where if there's anything specific to one authority's election, which is then coming through the gateway that hasn't previously been agreed, then that would be construed as that. So I think we just all watch what happens within that period of the, is it 6 weeks, isn't it, from the 26th of March? So if that's helpful, Chair, I don't know whether we need to minute that, but Dem services officers from authority should be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you, David. Mike.
Thank you, Bridget. Just to say, first of all, that I support that. Secondly, I think it might be quite useful if all the members on this group were to record, so rather than just doing it, that anyone indicate if they have dissent.
Oh, okay, all right. Stephen.
Yes, Chair. I support you as well, and Nigel.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're doing a recorded vote in effect. Who am I now missing? Joanna.
Happy to support. Seems like a good idea.
Thank you. Councillor Ray Bryan.
Yes, happy to support, Chairman.
Thank you. Who am I missing now? Any other councillors, please, can you speak up now, please?
Well, just like to thank everybody, and obviously continue to give Bridget my support. I think we've worked well together the last 2 years or so. So I'm very happy to do that, Bridget.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, well, that looks as though that's unanimous. I can't see that we've missed any other councillor, so yeah, we'll take that as supported. Thank you. I think that's it. No other business, and date of next meeting is Wednesday the 17th of March 2021, and we've actually finished early, which is a miracle. So I hope you all have a very happy Christmas and look forward to seeing you all in March. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been a good meeting.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.